Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we're the Quantum Mechanics. We're the paranormal podcast for the believers, the doubters, and everybody in between. I can't see what you're going to do this week as an episode, Ben.
Well, that's because it's invisible.
Oh, yay! Much teased.
I know, but I got into it, and then it became a never-ending piece of research, so I had to end it somewhere. But it was something that it had really never occurred to me, but it turns out to be one of those things. So spontaneous human invisibility. And it started with me looking into something else which I'm equally fascinated with, but it didn't actually go anywhere. But do you ever remember when you were a kid being able to go downstairs so effortlessly you were almost floating?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, so do loads of people. And I remember I guess I was about 6 or 7. I remember how easy it was to just you could go down the stairs without even thinking about it. And a lot of people claim that they could float or fly down the stairs. And looking back, I was like, yeah, I think that's how it felt. But then I looking around, I think maybe that's just because children are light. And
pretty flexible. I remember kind of almost sliding down the stairs, bumping down the carpet. And can you imagine doing that now?
No, the last time I tried that, I did tear some cartilage in my knee. So I'm still looking into spontaneous human flying, but spontaneous human invisibility, it is a thing. And I first encountered the work of Donna Higbee when I was looking into this, because in the summer of 1994, she explains that she became very interested in this really peculiar phenomena of spontaneous involuntary invisibility. Now, we're going to talk about both kinds, voluntary and involuntary.
Okay.
But she started her research in the US, which is where she lived. She said that she engaged with other researchers, and it turns out some of them had heard of cases like this. So she decides to put a inquiry letter out into well-known journals, some online bulletin board systems, and the letters began pouring in, giving her quite a broad picture of what was happening out there in just in the US. Then it broadened out and we get stories from all over the world. So one of the first stories that she gets in is that of Vera in Ventura in California. And she describes going into a post office and being completely ignored by other customers and indeed the clerk. She says she contacts Vera and they have a conversation about this, and Vera says that it has happened to her in other places, usually in other stores and public places. This is also a familiar story with somebody called Glenda in Fort Worth. She experienced invisibility in a cafeteria and a movie theatre. Every one of these cases, she says the person is still physically present, although unable to be seen or heard. And it becomes a frustration for them usually. And from the point of view of the invisible person, the world looks normal and they have no idea that they can't be seen or heard by people around them.
And I'm just putting my sceptical head on a bit. Who's to say they're just not being ignored rather than going invisible?
Well, I will go into some cases, and I think
I get if you're standing at a counter waiting to be served and you never get there would be a good one. Don't know how you can be invisible. Quite handy to be invisible in the cinema. You can walk in without paying and sit there, without any problem, can't you?
Well, I'm going to go into actually something which might prove that it is possible.
Okay.
And an instruction booklet on how to do. I say booklet. It's quite a thick book because I've read it. Let's just go into some of these early accounts that were given. There's one, Jean in Tucson, Arizona. She gets these invisibility spells every time not every time, but they occur when she's in the library, so checking out books or buying clothes. From her letter, she makes this quote: "I've had this happen in stores, restaurants, many places. I remember joking to a friend of mine one time that I felt I could walk into a bank, help myself to a pile of bills, and no one would ever see me because I was invisible." This is just her joking because she didn't even realise that the time she was. But then she says, "I began to realise that perhaps I was invisible. There's no physical reason why I should be. I'm taller than average for my sex. I'm 5'9" and 55, and I've got bright red hair. You wouldn't think a tall woman with red hair, high heels, and a purple dress and dangling earrings would be invisible. And yet, nobody talks to me. Nobody acknowledges me. And she says she finds this really curious. At the time, there's no sort of correlation with her mood or anything like that. It just seems to be when she's in those particular places, this happens. But then we go on to hear from Peter in Gloucestershire, in the UK, of course, who relates the time when he was at a private party in 1987, and he walks upstairs to use the toilet, and he's followed by a woman who also wanted to use the bathroom. The woman motioned for him to go in first, and she stood outside the door to wait her turn. Peter uses the bathroom, opens the door, walks out into the hallway, closes the door behind him. He went on down the stairs and walked over to some friends and started talking to them. They all ignored him completely. He thought they were playing a joke on him, so he walked away and found his girlfriend and asked her for a cigarette. She, too, acted like she didn't see or hear him. He was getting frustrated by this point, and he thought, OK, the joke's gone too far. So he walked back upstairs to catch the woman coming out of the bathroom to ask her for a cigarette. So he goes up the stairs, and on reaching the bathroom landing, he comes across this woman again who was standing still outside the bathroom door. When she saw me, he says, her face dropped in surprise. For clearly she thought that I was still in the bathroom. He returns to the party downstairs, and everything was normal again, and he was able to be seen and heard. When he questioned his friends and his girlfriend as to why they'd ignored him, they all swore blind that they'd never seen or heard him. Obviously, the woman upstairs had not seen him come out of the bathroom or go downstairs because she would have walked in, of course. Then there's the case of Melanie in Ventura. She became invisible while sitting in her own living room sofa, staring at the wall, lost in her own thoughts. And this is kind of interesting. This is going to be something that comes out in a theme later, this losing yourself in your thoughts and staring at something.
Okay.
She says her husband was walking around the house looking for her, but could not see her sitting there, only several feet away from where he was walking. This lasted for about 10 minutes, and she said she was suddenly visible again. Her husband was quite upset with her and thought that she'd been hiding from him. She assured him that she'd been sitting there all along, but to this day, he doesn't believe her.
So there's some interesting bits about this. If we go with the flow of how it works or how it manifests, if you take the example of the guy in the bathroom, so he can't be seen, he can't be heard, but he has the ability to interact with objects.
Physical objects, yes.
Yeah, he can open a door, he can close a door, he could probably carry something.
Yeah.
Which is making me think, because the first thing I thought when you said him coming out the bathroom, if somebody had let me go in first, I'd probably come out and say, oh, thanks, all yours, you know what I mean? Which he may have done.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Wouldn't go in there for a while. No.
Yeah, I'd give it a few. But I wonder if, in that case, if let's say you're carrying a drink or smoking a cigarette, is it almost like in the movies? Is a cigarette just floating in midair?
No, that's a very interesting point.
Okay.
And I'm going to come on to the theories about how this happens later on, but no, it would be everything around your body sort of...
within the zone.
Within a zone, yeah. And we'll find out why in a bit.
Okay.
Janice in Minneapolis, Minnesota, of course, she's had a number of invisibility experiences throughout her life. There's one that was reported that lasted longer than usual. She says, as a teenager, she fell in with a group of friends who decided to see if they could actually steal something from a department store and not get caught. As luck would have it, the entire group was caught and taken into custody, including Janice. They were taken to the police station and one by one they were questioned. All that is, except Janice. Although she was standing right there, no one paid the slightest attention to her, not the police, nor the guards, nor the office personnel. She finally just got up and walked out of the police station without ever being questioned or anyone trying to stop her.
Handy.
When she later talked with her friends about what happened at the police station, they said she wasn't even there. And yet she rode in the police car with everyone else, and they thought that I was still in the store. No one had seen her from the moment the police had arrived on the scene until the time she walked out of the police station.
So she got into the police car on her own accord, basically.
Yeah, well, she was rounded up with the rest of her friends.
Right, she thought.
And she thought, yes, we have all been caught. And yet, her friends said, no, we thought you were still there. We thought you'd got away.
Suggests that it almost happened when she needed it.
Well, yes, that's right. And this is why there's a sort of a thought that maybe it comes around from heightened emotions, and that might come into it. That might come into it.
Okay.
But I've got some more examples later. But first of all, I just wanted to get into some historical reference for all this, because this is what the author of this piece does. And I'll just highlight a few of the bits. So she points out that in Hinduism, from some documents between 700 and 300 BCE, there are what are known as the secret doctrines called the Upanishads, which were written for students. And we find here the idea that concentration and meditation can make the body imperceptible to others. And it references a line that says, a direct contact with the light of the eyes no longer existing, the body disappears. And then later in Rosicrucian writings from Europe in the 15th century, among the papers of that time, there are a number of them which talk about invisibility. A brother of the Rosicrucian fraternity wrote a paper on how to walk invisibly among men, and there is evidence that this was being taught in those early days. There's a gentleman called H. Spencer Lewis, who's the founder of the ancient and mystical order Rosicrucis in San Jose, California. He stated that one can gain invisibility with the use of clouds, and this cloud thing is going to come up quite a lot. He says that these clouds or bodies of mist can be called out of the invisible to surround a person and shut him out of the sight of others. Then there's another Masonic leader, he's an early Masonic leader, John Mackey, and the early Masons are believed to be a offshoot of the Rosicrucians. They taught a method whereby any man could render himself invisible. This is a misogynistic writing from the period. Any human could render themselves invisible. There's another, this sounds made up, but I believe it is true, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. They left manuscripts describing the ritual of invisibility. These manuscripts talk about surrounding yourself with a shroud, which is described as looking like a cloud. It is said that Madame Blavatsky of the Theosophical Society witnessed this invisibility for herself and was actually given the secret, thereafter accomplishing this for herself on several occasions in front of witnesses.
Sounds like Harry Potter's invisibility cloak, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And it's when we get into the book on how to...
That was a large snore from your dog there. It's all right, Bert.
As we get into the actual mechanics of how this is achieved, we will see it's not with a piece of clothing, but it is with a metaphorical cloak.
Okay.
But before we get onto that, I just wanted to point out something really interesting, because this had occurred to me as well. She says that at the start of her research, she was interested to see if there was a correlation between human invisibility and people who reported having experiences with non-human entities, because invisibility is one of the components that often makes up the abduction phenomenon. Okay. So we get that idea that people are spirited through windows that are locked, doors that are shut, roofs even, and nobody sees them come and go. And there are accounts of alien abductions where people see themselves lying on the bed before they're put back into the bed. So it's like, is it a soul that's being taken or something like that? But I think it's a good observation that people who are abducted by aliens, they often experience this invisibility piece. And she says that the first number of people that came to her with invisibility experiences were indeed self-confessed abductees, and she was hoping to see some sort of correlation between them. But then she said she continued to get letters from people having experienced invisibility who had no idea about the abduction phenomenon. They didn't even know that it happened. Now, she postulates that perhaps there are people who are abductees and they just don't know it, and that is possible, but she sort of says, I can't draw any conclusions from this. But it's a nice, interesting side note. I don't think it sort of takes us any further in the conversation, but it's
not necessarily an answer, but that sounds like it would be a byproduct of the abduction
yes, it could be
process, because the example, well, unless those examples are different, because in the examples you gave about being at the library or the cinema or whatever, or the party, the people are still there. It's not like they've gone somewhere else, unless it's the screen memory of them still being there, I guess.
Yes, I suppose it could be that he was abducted in the bathroom, and the effect of it takes a while to wear off.
Yeah.
And there is a scientific reason that might be true, and I will come on to that in a bit.
Right. Okay, that's interesting.
But let's have a look at how this invisibility could be created intentionally. And there's a book literally called Invisibility by the author Steve Richards. And I managed to get a copy. They're actually very cheap, the paperback versions. The hardback versions are much more expensive. But this is an extraordinary, unimposing book is the way to do it, is the way to describe it, because it is literally a book about how to make yourself invisible. But it doesn't, the book The Secret, it sort of says, this has been hidden from humankind and known by mystics. And this is very, very matter of fact. It's quite hard to follow, but I break it down for you so you can sort of follow along on how he suggests you do it. And then we'll come on to some examples that, I guess, prove his point.
So just before we start that, to be clear, he's not making an alien connection with this. He's just saying it's something any human could do?
Any human can do.
Okay, all right.
So the way that you make yourself invisible, and he step one, he says you construct your laboratory. Now, this isn't a literal laboratory. This is a quiet, undisturbed area where you can focus. The idea is to have an environment conducive to concentration and do the work that he is going to instruct you to do. Okay. So in terms of, it's a laboratory of your own mind, as it were.
Right.
And then you come on to directed attention. The practitioner is instructed to sit comfortably and fix their gaze on a single point in the room, maintaining this steady focus. It's crucial as it allows the energy to accumulate in a specific area, forming the initial stages of what you're trying to build, which is a cloud of invisibility. So just the sheer notion that you can gaze on a single point in the room and begin to build energy is what he's kind of getting at here. Right. And I suppose some people do feel it. I don't know if you've ever done it, but sometimes you sort of feel like you're daydreaming, you're staring at a single spot, and then you sort of jerk yourself awake because you've been focusing so hard on it. You wonder where you've been and you've been lost in thoughts. So he's saying channel that and do that mindfully.
Okay.
Then you have to defocus your eyes slightly, akin to looking beyond the object of focus. So a bit like those 3D stereoscopic images of like jumping dolphins and stuff that were big in the 90s.
I could never get them.
I think I got one once.
I'm sorry, slight aside, but my partner's dad has one in his office, and my partner can see it every time. I'm like, I almost left feeling, no, there is nothing there. You're just having me on. This is just a load of dots, and you're just trying to fool me. But yes, okay. I thought I'd make that point because I've never been able to see them ever.
I'm with you. People, yes, because these were really big when I was at university, and it was all the rage to buy the posters and have them up in your room.
Yeah.
And there'd be people like, look at this, it's an amazing... They usually were dolphins.
Yeah.
And like, nope, I cannot
Can't you see the amazing bird? No, I can't.
No, I really can't. But I suppose this passive visual perception is something that you can... I sometimes do it. It's almost like you go a bit cross-eyed and things go out of focus. And it's usually when my eyes are really tired and I'm staring at something in the distance. Yeah. But this is very akin to when I quite often reference Douglas Adams in these conversations. There's a chapter in one of his I forget which book it is in the series, but he talks about when Arthur is learning to fly. And the trick is to fall over and miss the ground. This is exactly what he's saying about sight. The trick is to look at something but not look at it. Yeah. And he says this gives you the ability to perceive subtle energies and aids, again, the formation of the cloud. Then you have to be guided, you guide yourself rather, to mentally will energy from different parts of the room into a forming cloud. You have to imagine this cloud coming together.
Right.
And he says this will involve subtle eye movements and visualization techniques to draw in what he describes as ambient energy, strengthening the cloud's presence. Now, I'm really giving you a very, very light overview of a book which is sort of 200 pages long. But this is what he's doing. Now, it sounds a bit glib when I'm saying, various techniques, but these techniques are very specific, and he goes into them, and they are guided by advice and mystical guidance by yogis and various other cultures that he's drawing on, and turned it into this sort of industrialized process of being able to make yourself invisible. So then you move between focus, concentration, and energy accumulation. You hold mental images with intense focus, ideally during deep breathing, to project an intention. And this intention is very simply, no one sees me. This is the intention you're building up. So once you've learned how to focus and bring energies around you, the next thing is this intention. No one sees me. And he suggests you do this for 10 to 15 minutes daily, picturing this cloud as a barrier that scatters others' gaze. So initially, you should be able to make people see you a little bit fuzzily. But as you build this intention and build the energy, they will see right through you. Cycling through these phases, you can build a denser and more substantial cloud. Eventually, you get to step 7. Once the cloud is sufficiently dense, the final step is to draw it around the body, effectively cloaking oneself. You may need to adjust the cloud's appearance to match the surroundings, ensuring seamless blending, and he suggests using a mirror placed several feet away to observe the effectiveness of the invisibility.
I was going to say, how would you know? Yeah.
Yeah. It's a sort of a strange thing to suggest, but he does point out that some people will make a very purple cloud, and so you can't be walking around in a purple cloud. You have to make it so that it sort of blends in with the light in the room. And obviously that would change if you were going outside, but the idea is that you build up a sort of a muscle memory of how to change it. It's like you're becoming a chameleon in some ways.
You know what comes out of a purple cloud, though?
Purple rain? Ah.
Only want to see you. I like the idea of a purple cloud.
I like the idea of a purple cloud, but you would end up...
It doesn't really help you.
No, you just end up as
You'd be more of an attention seeker than an invisibility seeker.
Here's Peter with his purple cloud. What's he doing in there? I mean, I suppose the advantage is you wouldn't have to wear any clothes, which would be useful in the summer. But
that was a leap.
Well, no, I mean, I was just trying to think of the advantage of having a cloud over anything else.
Oh, right, proper invisibility.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be quite good fun.
Yeah,
like going around a cloud, but you'd have to maintain such a level of intense focus.
What I like about the idea of it, do you have to keep concentrating to keep it there, or does it? Because I was thinking it'd be great, like gigs and major sporting events. You could get into anything, couldn't you?
Yeah.
And get right down the front or at the side of the stage. Yeah, I'm just going to stand at the side of the stage and watch. But then do you have to spend all your time concentrating so you don't lose it mid-focus?
So I believe... Well, I'll give you a couple of examples that he gives of people who've achieved it.
Right.
And you can sort of make up your own mind about how focused they are. So there's one which is actually taken from a Rosicrucian tale of a German adept who vanished during a demonstration before a group of scholars in a locked chamber. The adept, trained in alchemical and mystical arts, was said to be proving the Rosicrucian principle of transcending physical limits. Witnesses reportedly saw him chant softly, focus intently, and envelop himself in a faint silvery mist. When the mist cleared, he was gone, leaving only his cloak on the floor. The door remained bolted, and no trace of him was found. And Richard suggests that this was achieved by altering the observer's perception, possibly through trance-like state induced by the adept's ritual. So this is the idea that it's not just... You're not just surrounding yourself in an impenetrable shield, as it were. You're also intentionally affecting what is happening in the observer's eyes.
when he said he left his cloak on the floor, that's not his invisibility cloak.
No.
It's his clothes.
I knew a cloak was going to come up in the story, but it's not Harry Potter's one.
Right. Okay.
But this is an interesting one because this, again, is related in the book, and I've got some more modern accounts which are similar to these. But this is a British colonial officer in the 1800s who observed a yogi in a bustling Calcutta market. And the yogi is described as an elderly man with a serene demeanour, and he reportedly moved through the crowds unnoticed despite having these very distinctive saffron robes. The officer, who was curious, followed him but lost sight repeatedly, describing the yogi as fading whenever he looked at him directly. Later, at a temple, the yogi explained that he used a meditative technique to cloud men's minds, making himself psychologically invisible. He demonstrated this by sitting in plain view during a crowded festival, yet no one approached or acknowledged him, even when the officer pointed him out. Richard said that the officer documented this in a letter and was very fascinated and, I quote, awed by the yogi's calm control.
So in that example, he's not actually disappearing. He's making everybody else around.
He's making it so nobody can see him.
Disappeared.
So in that example, the military officer can still see him because the yogi has acknowledged him, but he's sort of broken the spell, as it were. But nobody else can. It's almost like he is. He's become more ephemeral, so he blinks in and out of existence. And this is, I found a very, very similar account from 2004. And this was written up in 2004 on abovesecret.com. A 29-year-old yoga instructor, Lila, practiced a meditation technique inspired by Siddhi training, focusing on dissolving her presence. So this is similar but different to what Richards was describing, whilst waiting for a train.
Like those bath bombs I got at Christmas. They dissolved as a present.
Oh, my Lord. So during, you throw me right off.
Pick it back up.
During a crowded rush hour, but stood still, she visualised a veil of air around her. A friend standing nearby swore that Lila blurred out for 10 seconds and commuters walked past without even glancing, even when she waved. She said she felt a cold emptiness and panicked that she'd lost her anchor. She stopped meditating and people noticed her again. And apparently the experience left her really shaken, and she avoided doing this again because she feared that she would fade too far. Now this...
What, not come back in some way?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting thing that comes up again. So I found another reference in 2012. This is a published account in, it is a UK spiritualist publication, Kindred Spirit, but nevertheless, it's a report on a 35-year-old druid, Eamon, who claimed to use a Celtic-inspired ritual to cloak himself during a music set. This is a Glastonbury festival event. Right. Chanting and visualising mist, he stood amongst fellow dancers, intending... This is the bit that... Listener, you will probably agree with me here. Intending to avoid pickpockets. I don't really buy that part of the story, but it's okay. There are better ways of avoiding pickpockets.
Do druids have pockets?
They've got big sleeves. I don't know. I suppose a druid can have a pocket.
Yeah. It could be in his civvy clothes, I guess.
Witnesses, including his partner, said Eamon faded for a moment, his silhouette dimmed, and though his festival wristband remained. Eamon felt a pull as if something else was watching him, and he collapsed, hyperventilating, and he avoided doing this ever again because he said, in his own words, he was seen by the void. And I think that's really interesting.
That sounds more like he's having a bad trip at Glastonbury, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, that one is probably the least convincing of all of them.
Also, there's the band is still visible. That doesn't really go with.
It doesn't
go
with the rest of the other pieces. No, but that idea of needing to be pulled back into reality,
right? So you don't disappear.
I think that I was going with it until avoiding pickpockets.
Yeah, doesn't feel like the biggest motivation for going invisible. I know I'll go invisible because nobody will pick my pocket. The other thing that's striking me about the way you described how this might work, or the process you've got to go, what your 7-step process effectively, seems very similar to me to the process of creating a tulpa.
Yes, it is actually. It is.
A lot of the steps seem very similar.
And it also reminded me this idea of manipulating the mind of the observer. This is something that came up when we were discussing pukas.
Yeah.
So there
But
is.
you could go with that, couldn't you? Let's go with it. Let's say it's a thing, and there is a 7-step process, and you can do it, make it happen. It could be almost like a tulpa. You are creating almost a cloak version, invisible, of yourself to pull around yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
The tulpa is not like another entity that you've brought into creation. It's a way of covering yourself.
So the idea there that you're talking about is really projecting what you want others to think, almost like a Jedi mind trick. These are not the droids you're looking for. That sort of thing. This is all great, but we like to ground ourselves in science on this show. And so I found some people talking about, I was going to say spontaneous human invisibility. Let's just say human invisibility overall.
Yeah.
Relating it to orchestrated objective reduction. Now, this is proposed by Roger Penrose and a fellow author, Stuart Hameroff, in a paper called, in a paper in Physical Review, 1996, where they suggest consciousness arises from quantum processes in microtubules within neurons. Bear with me here.
I thought that was going to be the case.
Superpositions of quantum states collapse into consciousness experience, potentially allowing non-local effects. Right, so that has caused some people, like there's a commentator called Deepak Chopra, to extrapolate this to claim that consciousness can influence external reality, therefore that you could make yourself invisible. So if consciousness could manipulate quantum collapses, and this is still a big if, this is just a proposal by Penrose. Nobody, including him, is suggesting that this is exactly how it works. It is just a proposal. But it is possible then that one may theoretically influence observers' perceptions, making themselves unseen by altering how others' brains process visual input. This resembles this Richard's psychic shield, not physical
Right.
shield, psychic shield. So it becomes not a physical obscuring of the person. It becomes this. So in this example, you get really metaphysical because the cloak that you are drawing around yourself is this perception altering energy that you are creating with your own consciousness. So what you've really done is focused your consciousness on moving, however it works, the consciousness in the people observing you. And then when they see this silvery cloak or purple cloak or however it's described, this is the first way that the brain starts to misinterpret the object it's looking at.
So it's kind of observer theory in a way.
Well-
I was thinking about, because I was going back to the story of your guys walking down through the market being followed by, I think it was someone from the police.
It was a military man.
Military man. It's every time. What is that about? Sorry, that's a bit of a throwback comment to another episode where I always get the police and the military mixed up. If
You
anybody's
see a
wondering,
military parade and you're like, look at all those
look at those
police.
policemen. Lovely. All right, let me get back on it. So, if you go with a kind of observer theory type idea, because he was aware that the person was there, that changed, almost like the dual slit experiment. He was being observed, so he could be seen. But if people don't realise he's there, he's not being observed, so he can't be seen. That's what I was thinking. I've got no idea if that's right, but I was just thinking. So
you're right. Observer theory does come into this. What Penrose is suggesting there is that these superpositions of quantum states that collapse to create this consciousness experience. What he's saying is that perhaps that you can learn to collapse them in a way that affects somebody else's neurons. And the reason for that is just because it would be if you follow Penrose's idea, it would be theoretically possible. But no one is saying that is what is happening. The observer theory, where the mere act of observation changes what is happening in a particular scenario within the dual slit experiment, I looked into that and I was sort of knocked back by the idea that is actually... I went down that route, and I did ask somebody on a particular forum about this, and they said, no, you're misinterpreting it, because it's the act of measurement rather than just the act of observation. And that would change that, because in this circumstance, you're not really, though you're observing, you're not measuring, and that there is a slight difference. But there's something else in quantum mechanics which might affect this, and that's entangled particles.
Right.
So entangled particles which share states, where measuring one instantly affects the other, where in fact influencing one influences the other, regardless of distance. That could mean perhaps that you could leverage entanglement to influence distant minds, subtly redirecting attention away from the person who wants to be invisible. So could you entangle your neuron with the observer's neuron? That, I think, is possibly the wildest of the speculations.
Because there's an easy way. Let me just try and hold on to this thought and see if this makes sense. The problem with that is, so let's. I know we're mixing theories together. I'm not saying they're one is right, but so there was the thing of, you can try this out with a mirror in front of you and maybe see the process yourself. I was wondering what would happen if you recorded it, filmed it.
Yeah.
Because if you go with that theory you're talking about, if you can't see the person on film, that would mean that you would have to be constantly influencing people's perception, wouldn't it? So let's say you posted it as a TikTok and it got 1 million views. Every time someone viewed it, you would have to be influencing them, otherwise they would see you.
Well, you've also pointed out the other thing that I was going to say as well, in the fact that if you can not see yourself in the mirror, both of those last theories that I read out can't be true, because you wouldn't be quantum entangling yourself.
Yes, yeah.
So
you're right.
I think you're right. There's either, as far as I know, no one's captured any of this on camera ever.
Well, you wouldn't know, would you?
No, you wouldn't know. I think the other way of looking at it is that there's either multiple different techniques to achieve this, or so a lot of people say that it's actually just hypnotism. Are you familiar with the Indian rope trick?
Yeah, this is where you make a rope look like it's travelling upwards and it's firm rather than a dangly one.
That's it. And then, yes. And so there's an original account where a boy scales, so the rope goes up into the sky. A boy goes up he scales the rope. Then the magician scales the rope after him carrying a sword. And then from above, bit like arms and legs chopped off, land on the ground. Then the rope collapses, and then the boy is there all in one piece, and the magician is there as well. This is the trick. This is the reported trick.
Yeah.
And of course, it's impossible. And there are people who claim to have seen this done, but they can't quite remember did they look up, what did they see? And although the Indian rope trick can be achieved now in roughly the same, sort of the same trick, those original accounts dating back 200 years or more, when there were no sort of no gimmicks that one could imagine that this could cause this. The idea was that this was done by hypnotizing the audience into believing to being told. So none of this actually happens, but like a stage hypnotist, Darren Brown, he makes everyone think that that's what they've seen, because there's no observer who sort of has been able to photograph an ancient, a traditional account of this trick. So a lot of people online, and indeed in a couple of threads that I've read that are attached to some of these accounts that I've been talking about, they say that they believe that it is just an incredible mind manipulation trick, and there is nothing paranormal about it at all.
But it's my understanding you can't, like in an audience, let's say, you can't hypnotise everyone, can you? Some people can't be or resistant to it.
Yeah.
So I get that the majority of people would go, oh, where'd he go? But there would be people around, like at the party, who would still see him.
Okay, so this is my answer to two of those things. I think the first one, with the rope trick, somebody will say, oh my God, did you see that? That the boy was chopped up and then he came back to one piece. And the other person says, I didn't see anything of the sort. And he was going, well, you missed a trick. Like, literally. I'm like, oh, I didn't see any of that. And so the person that didn't see any of that, they just didn't see the trick. And so there's nothing to disprove. Did you go and see the Indian rope trick? Yes. What did you see? I didn't see anything. Oh, so it's not like they saw, they saw a cheat. They just didn't see anything.
Yeah.
With the guy at the party, I think there's so many of these accounts of people saying that they have become invisible. And I come back to me going down the stairs thinking, maybe I did fly. I wonder whether in those accounts, it's a little bit like, do you remember it was about 10 years ago, there was a video going around and it was a picture of people, it was a video of people doing all sorts of circus tricks. And then you stop the video and you say, what did you see? And the observer says, well, there was a guy who was a juggler and there was a clown in a car. So did you see the massive gorilla?
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah. And so in that famous example, somebody in a gorilla suit walks across the screen and nobody sees them.
Yeah.
And so I wonder whether this is what is happening with these people. Like, so those friends of his, they're so engrossed in conversation, they're in the middle of having a laugh about something. He walks over, goes, all right, and he just like, they're so focused on what they're doing, they don't see him. His girlfriend is trying to earwig on someone else's conversation.
Yeah.
Getting some gossip maybe, or trying to get somebody to find where the drink has gone. And she just doesn't see him.
Doesn't notice him. Yeah.
And the woman upstairs is so focused on holding her bladder in that she didn't even notice that he'd come out.
Yeah.
So I think there are very real world explanations for these things.
Also, I've got to have a go at that guy for his bathroom etiquette. Because when you're at a party and there's a queue and you come out the bathroom, you leave the door open. You don't close it. That's terrible etiquette because that's just going to cause problems.
It does. Yes.
I have another slight theory on this if we go with it.
My theory, what it is?
Simulated reality.
Okay. Yeah. Or it's like what, a glitch in the Matrix type of deal?
Yeah. Or maybe there is some way we can influence our programming subconsciously. Or it's a rare part of the game where your character can go invisible, hence why there's not very many of it happening. So that could be being controlled by someone else.
Yes, okay, I see what you mean.
It's like a big Easter egg in the game if you're really, really clever, you can make your character invisible for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yes, so that would also go back to some of those ideas about the daemon driving the human, some of the ideas that derive from Philip K. Dick ideas.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, no, I buy that. The thing about it being real or not, is it a real phenomena or not? Although I've just sort of given you some examples about how it might not be, I did find so many. The reason I didn't read out, I've got quite a lot of other notes on them, but I didn't read them out because they're all sort of the same. You know, I went into a place, nobody could see me.
Yeah.
Like the most compelling one in the ones I read out was the woman whose husband couldn't see her. And I think that is interesting. Although, you know, my partner would probably joke that I can be staring into the fridge looking for the milk and I'm like, I can't see the milk. And she just walks straight in and goes, it's there.
Yeah, I have that all the time.
Yeah. And I think that is...
I can never find the potato peeler.
No.
And it's always in the same spot. I just can't see it.
You've got a mystic potato peeler. You had a stolen potato peeler.
It was the corkscrews. The ones that go missing. Yeah.
But I do think that example, that's quite extreme because it's such an enclosed space and it's two people who obviously know each other well. And she was very upset in that note that her husband thinks she's lying, and she says she's definitely not lying. Now, again, I'm sure any of you listening could say, well, what she forgot about was she went to the bathroom and he walked past at just the wrong time to miss her going in and miss her going out. And then she goes, I was sitting here all the time, and admitted I was having a wee for 30 seconds. So he walks around the house for 5 minutes looking for her, misses the fact she's gone into the loo. You know, there's a very sort of Jonathan Creek-esque idea that could explain the fact she wasn't missing. He just didn't see her. But again, the amount of these reports, and not just describing that person being missing, but coming back into existence. Like, I really don't know how to explain the woman who was arrested but not. I think that is a fascinating account.
Yeah. But again, if people can do it on demand, let's say, there would be a good way of proving it. They could, for instance, I was saying going to, like, you'd be able to get into concerts, you'd be able to get into whatever. You could go, what I'm going to do with my iPhone, make myself invisible. Next week, I'm going to give you 3 photographs. Me, Wembley, on stage with Beyonce, and I'll take a photo that proves that I had to be there. Then here is me in the Houses of Parliament standing in front of Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Question Time and, whatever, one other. Here's me running across the field and kicking the ball at the FA Cup final today.
Yeah.
If you could do it, that you'd be pretty hard to disprove that because of the angles of the photographs, and that, you almost create a photograph that would be impossible to get unless you were there.
Yeah. And as far as I know, nobody outside of perhaps a TikTok video that I haven't found has done that. But it's likely. And I suppose the other thing is, like, you'd have to.
Now with AI as well.
Exactly. I think even then it'd be hard to prove. But you're right. One of the things I did come across was nobody has done this under, not that we know of, has done this under laboratory conditions.
Yeah.
I did read some rumours that the CIA had been playing with it. Because, of course,
if
they had.
It was a thing, I mean, it's the ultimate spy tool, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. And it seems like I couldn't find any papers on their archive about it, but I did find some people saying, the CIA did experiment with this, and they couldn't. In that particular case, it was felt that they couldn't sort of industrialize it like they were trying to do with remote viewing. They couldn't make it
stable enough.
They couldn't make it stable enough because a lot of these people glint in and out of existence, and that's no good. Like, when you look at actual invisibility, so there are lots of different books called Invisibility, and when I pulled out what I thought was a book on this thing, an esoteric version of it, it was actually all of the incredible techniques that humans have used to make themselves invisible all over. And I was reminded I did actually skim through that because it was fascinating. This actually comes up in the Winds of Change podcast. If you haven't listened to that, it's amazing. It's about 3 years old now, but it's about whether the song by the Scorpions, The Wind of Change, was created by the CIA to help push the Soviet Union into collapse. But that aside, there's a bit in there where they describe something that I then read about in this book, which is the CIA developed in one of their little skunk works. They developed a disguise so good that you could put it on in just a mere second and be completely mistaken for somebody else. So it's basically, in raw terms, they didn't explain exactly how it works because this is classified, but it's basically a thing that you pull over your head. Imagine it, like I read it as being a bit like a stocking, but it is so good, it turns your face completely and believably into somebody else. So what they wanted at this period was something where if you were being tailed by, you were working at the American Embassy in America, the American Embassy in Russia, and obviously they had their spies just as the Russians had their spies in Washington, and you're being tailed by the guy who's been assigned to follow you around the Soviet Union, and you can't shake them. You turn around a corner, you pull this over your head, and then you are rendered invisible to them because you are not the same person.
That's very Mission Impossible, isn't it?
But it got signed off because they give a great account of this in Winds of Change, where the people who invented it, because the head of the spy agency at that time was, of course, George Bush.
Oh, right.
And they go into George Bush's office and they demonstrate it, and he is so shocked by what he sees. He sort of describes it as like, this is as close to actual magic as you could possibly get. He signs it off immediately on the spot, saying it's the most incredible thing he's seen.
So that must still be in use if it's...
Right, it must still be in use.
But it's better, isn't it, than that version we found? We did it on those CIA weirdest things where they had the blow-up doll in the car. Do you remember that one?
The blow-up doll in the car,
So
yes.
he'd jump out the car and set the blow-up doll off, and then they'd be following, thinking, yeah, that's much more techy.
Yeah. But apparently eminently doable. But anyway, that is how you can probably more reliably become invisible if you want to do it in a spying scenario.
Did you have a go at the 7 steps?
It takes 3 to 5 years to learn.
Oh, well, we ain't got that time.
Oh, well, I hope I do.
No, but I mean to dedicate to it. I mean.
No, but I did. Genuinely, it was one of those, because I read the book is very hard to get into, and it is hard to read because, like I said, it's almost written with the same creative flair as an Airfix instruction manual, but with a lot more sort of, I guess, knowledge that it assumes you might have from the writings of yogis and stuff, which I don't have. But you don't actually need any of that. Once you get into it and you start sort of buying into what he's saying, and you don't kind of like start rubbing your chin at everything going, oh, come on, that's not true, and just go with it. It's actually quite a fascinating read. And
okay, here's a question for you then. If you could only pick one, would you want to create a tulpa or be able to come invisible?
I think invisible, because
I think so too.
it's so, I don't know what the word is. It's so mystical, and it's one of those things from as a kid. Like I think as a kid, like growing up, we always speak about this, the lore that you learn from cartoons and stuff growing up. You do sort of get a point where, you know, there's always like, the one that I remember is, I think, Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner.
Yeah.
And Coyote buys some Acme invisibility cream, and he covers himself in it, and of course he becomes invisible. And then I can't remember what goes wrong, but obviously something goes wrong. But you kind of go, oh yeah, there's probably going to be invisibility cream. When I'm old enough, because I'm only 6, you probably can buy invisibility cream. Why would you not? That seems like a thing. And then it's sort of one of the disappointments of becoming older is there is no such thing as invisibility cream.
Or X-ray glasses.
X-ray glasses, and Tom Cat's face doesn't turn into an iron when he gets smacked in the face with an iron. All of those things.
You can't draw a tunnel on the side of a mountain.
You can, but it doesn't mean that the Roadrunner is going to run into it.
Yeah.
But there is a new book out which I'm going to give it a breath, and then I'll probably cover it later in the year, about tulpas and new evidence, including a whole chapter on people who see Harry Potter characters.
Okay.
Because we've spoken about this before.
Yeah.
Like, how come we don't see Spider-Man walking down the street or Harry Potter walking down the street? Well, perhaps we do, and this book is about it. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but it's something I'm keeping. But anyway, invisibility, out of like everything that I've said, although we don't score these things normally, I want to say that I come down on the side of, I do think there is something in it, and I do think it's probably scientifically relevant. I said relevant, that's not the right word. I think it might be scientifically explainable at some point, because what I keep coming back to is it makes sense from an evolutionary point of view.
Yeah, it would, wouldn't it?
And if it makes sense from an evolutionary point of view, as a organism, if we ever had the chance to do it, we would probably do it. So
if you look how good an octopus is at it.
Yes.
I know that's camouflage. It's different, but
I know
it's a type of
yeah.
invisibility. It's
Well-
quite amazing, and it can move and do it. You know?
Exactly. The amount of effort that the world goes to camouflage itself. The ultimate camouflage would be invisibility. And if it was at all possible, we would likely have developed it. And so I sort of fall down on it. I give that book 4 invisible yogis out of 5 because I do think it's worth a read. I don't often say that. Quite often I come away like Ringmakers of Saturn. If you want to laugh, read that. But actually,
Or the Montauk Project.
Richard's invisibility book, for £3 off Amazon, I would give it a shout and take it on holiday and start practicing. Although
Buy it now before it disappears.
yeah, I think there's 18 left on there. But yeah.
I'm
So-
not sure about invisibility. I'm not sure I can see it, but you know, it's. I saved it to the end. Did I not? I was very good all the way through.
Well, thank you. It is eminently punnable.
Yeah,
I will say
was
that.
very reserved. I felt.
It's eminently punnable, and you can see why I delayed that for a couple of weeks because I wanted to read that book in full,
Yeah.
and actually digest it because it's not something. Quite often, you know, you get when you do a podcast like this, you get quite good at reading a book, and I don't use AI to shorten the book because it misses all the nuances. So I tend to read it and then take photographs with an OCR reader and then sort of turn that into notes and such. And it took me so long from this because I'm thinking, I know what he's getting at, and then he just goes on to something else. I'm like, oh, right, I need to get my mind in that space. But anyway, it's really good. Invisibility, who knows if it's real? But I'm going to segue into saying something that is real is supporting us at patreon.com/TQM pod and getting episodes a week early without adverts. Access to our Discord server. Thank you for everyone who has been posting on there recently. We're going to turn it into what we wanted to turn into. What else do they get? They get an extra show, which we're going to do in a moment. Ben and Peter's Extra Scoop.
Indeed.
And you also get the joy of helping your the show that you love.
Yeah. So either go to TQM podcast. I always get the thing wrong. What is it? TQ? No, it's
Patreon.com/TQM pod.
that is true. Or if you want to make it easier, just click the link in the show notes.
Well, click the link in the show notes. Exactly.
Excellent. Well, I've got no idea what I'm doing next week because I was supposed to be working on an episode this week and I got distracted with something else on the quantum mechanics, which I'll probably mention on the extra group as well.
Yeah,
so.
you've just shown me that looks pretty good. Something good coming up for people.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, look, we will see you next week.
We will.
Yes.
Even if we don't see each other.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Take care. See you
later.
next time.
Bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?